Hello everyone! While there are plenty of new characters releasing in Snezhnaya, Mizuki is getting significantly buffed in Genshin version 7.0. Although Mizuki already received some buffs in version Luna 8 with the release of Sandrone in Stellar Conduct, she is getting additional buffs in 7.0 to make her synergize with the new Stellar Swirl reaction. And despite being a standard banner character, with her best teammates, Stellar Swirl Mizuki looks like a very strong and top meta DPS. So in this guide, I'll be covering everything you need to know about the newly buffed Mizuki, including how her kit was upgraded, the best ways to build her, her potential best teams, and how valuable she looks in the meta, while referencing pre-release calcs from multiple different theory crafters, with additional help from the T-Seers and Mobalytics, who have a written Mizuki guide up on their website that contains all the important information about Mizuki in a summarized format. Before we talk about Mizuki, let's first go over what Stellar Swirl is and how it works. Stellar Swirl is one of the two Stellar Glimmer reactions in the game, the other being Stellar Conduct. Stellar Swirl is the Stellar version of specifically Cryo Swirl, Cryo plus Animo, and is enabled for your team in 7.0 if you have Sandrone, Odette, or Cryo Traveler on the team. Triggering regular Cryo Swirl simply deals Cryo damage and spreads Cryo onto nearby enemies, but Stellar Swirl is a bit more complicated. When you trigger Stellar Swirl by applying Animo onto an enemy that already has Cryo, Radiant Stellar Swirl will be enabled, activating important bonuses in certain character kits. In addition, the reaction itself will deal Animo Stellar Swirl damage and create a Stellar Vortex on the field. This Vortex will remain on the field for 3 seconds and will grow and be empowered when you trigger additional Stellar Swirl reactions within the 3-second time frame. At the end of its duration, the Vortex will explode, which allows you to jump high in the air, but more importantly deals AoE Cryo Stellar Swirl damage, applying Cryo to any enemies that are hit, with its damage and AoE scaling with the number of Stellar Swirl reactions you triggered within its 3-second duration. Triggering 1 to 2 Stellar Swirls gives a reaction multiplier of 2 for the Vortex explosion, but triggering at least 3 gives a reaction multiplier of 3 for the Vortex explosion. Triggering more than 3 Stellar Swirl reactions within 3 seconds doesn't increase the Vortex explosion damage, only the AoE size. But if you trigger 6 Stellar Swirl reactions before 3 seconds, the Vortex will explode early. So Stellar Swirl has 2 kinds of reaction damage when triggering the reaction. Animo Stellar Swirl damage when you trigger the reaction to create the vortex, and when you trigger additional Stellar Swirl reactions that grow the vortex, and the final vortex explosion damage, which deals Cryo Stellar Swirl damage. How Stellar Swirl's reaction damage is calculated is in the same manner as how Lunar Charge and Lunar Crystallized reaction damage are calculated. It will count any characters that took part in the elemental aura of the reaction as contributors and calculate an individual damage number for each. It then ranks all the damage numbers, gives the higher damage numbers more weight and the lower damage numbers less weight, then adds them all up to get the final damage. And aside from the Stellar Swirl reaction damage, certain characters can deal direct Stellar Swirl damage with their abilities, which don't apply any element, but will scale off the original abilities multipliers and stat scaling, the base reaction damage buff from character passives, elemental mastery, stellar reaction damage bonus but not elemental damage bonus, enemy elemental res but not their defense, crit, and lastly elevation. Lastly, Stellar Swirl and Stellar Conduct can both be triggered at the same time in the same team. However, Radiant Stellar Conduct will take priority. So units that have Radiant Stellar Glimmer in their kit will prioritize being Stellar Conduct oriented if you trigger both reactions at the same time. Now, let's go over the buffs to Mizuki's kit. To first quickly summarize her original kit, she pressed her skill to enter her enhanced state called the Dream Drifter state, where she periodically fired attacks onto nearby enemies to deal AoE Animo damage, and these attacks are fired automatically, about 1 hit every 0.8 seconds, so all you do on Mizuki is just move around the enemy. She also buffed the party Swirl damage based on her elemental mastery while in the Dream Drifter state, and her burst dealt AoE Animo damage and periodically spawned snacks on the field, which you could pick up to either heal you if your HP was low, or explode to deal AoE Animo damage. If you have Mizuki C4, it would do both at the same time, and if you don't pick up the snacks, they would eventually explode to deal Animo damage on their own. Mizuki's overall gameplay is the exact same after her buffs. She simply buffs more and deals more damage, especially in Stellar Swirl teams. Mizuki received a new passive that allows her to buff the team's EM based on 10% of her own EM while she's in the Dream Drifter state. In addition, every 2.5 seconds, after triggering a Swirl or Stellar Swirl reaction while in the Dream Drifter state, Mizuki's next instance of Animo damage in the Dream Drifter state will deal additional damage scaling with her EM. And when Radiant Stellar Swirl is active, she will fire an additional instance of EM scaling Animo damage that is considered direct Stellar Swirl damage. On average, Mizuki should get 3 to 4 of these attacks every rotation. On top of that, Mizuki's skill will now buff the team's Stellar Swirl damage as well as regular Swirl damage while she's in her Dream Drifter state, scaling with her EM. So in Stellar Swirl Swirl teams, Mizuki will be an EM scaling Stellar Swirl main DPS. Her talent leveling priority is the same as before. Level her skill first to increase her Stellar Swirl damage buff. Then you can level her burst if you need increased healing from her snacks, but generally you'll only use her burst if you need the extra healing from it. Mizuki's Constellations also got some pretty nice buffs. Mizuki's stellar damage is now included in the original C1 damage buff, but also C1 now adds an additional instance of anemo damage when C1 is procced, which will be considered direct stellar swirl damage in stellar swirl teams. C2 now also gives 20% pyro, hydro, cryo, electro, and animal res shred while Mizuki is in the Dream Drifter state on top of the original team-wide elemental damage bonus. C4 now gives additional healing to the lowest HP teammate, and lastly, on top of the original C6, C6 will additionally give the team stellar swirl damage, 10% crit rate, and 20% crit damage while Mizuki is in the Dream Drifter state. In addition, Mizuki herself will gain extra crit rate and crit damage based on the amount of EM she has over 500, requiring a total of 1000 EM to get the max extra crit stats. Overall, the most impactful constellations she has in terms of damage are her C1, C2, and C6. So if you're close to those breakpoints and are interested in playing Mizuki, you may want to consider picking Mizuki from the Constellation selector or pick her from the standard character selector we should get on the anniversary patch. Now there is a weird potential bug with how ping affects Mizuki's special passive procs, which is the source of her direct stellar swirl damage in her base kit. With normal regular good ping, on average she should get about 3 to 4 passive procs every rotation, but based on testing from multiple theorycrafters from Jason mains on the training dummy, they found that the number of passive procs changes with ping. C1 procs are unaffected, but at around 200 ping, Mizuki was generally only getting 1 passive proc, which would significantly lower her stellar swirl damage. But weirdly, at some very high pings, they also observed that you could get more passive procs on average. Currently, it seems that around 180 to 290 ping results in less procs, but above that you could technically get more, but the exact ping ranges are unknown at the moment. And also, this potential issue could get fixed or be a non-issue on release. I just wanted to let you know of this possibility in case you play with high ping and notice that your Mizuki team is dealing less damage than expected. For Mizuki's new best builds in her new Stellar Swirl teams, she wants weapons that give elemental mastery and or crit. Her signature is still her best in slot weapon choice, but other 5-star EM related weapons like Nahida's signature, Sitlali's signature, and Nefer's signature are good as well. For 4-star weapons, if you have a high refined Dawning Frost, it's solid. Otherwise, Wit Sith is a great general weapon option. Even if you don't hit the EM buff on the passive, it still gives a lot of crit damage with the substat, which is nice. Mizuki can also use Sacrificial Fragments. Not only does it have an EM substat, but the ability to refresh Mizuki's elemental skill can enable some unique rotations, where Mizuki can skill, cancel it, then use her skill again. And this grants 8 animal particles instead of 4, and allows an extended field time on Mizuki. Here is a weapon comparison based on team DPS for Mizuki in a Farazon Cryo Traveler Odette team done by raulfigas. Feel free to pause to take a closer look. For artifacts, she has a lot of options. 4-piece Scarlet Proof is the new Stellar Swirl DPS set she can use, giving her crit rate and Stellar Swirl damage after she triggers a Stellar Swirl reaction. However, since the 2-piece gives attack, but she mainly scales with EM, this set is not her clear best in slot. You can use other sets like 4-piece Gilded or 2-piece 2-piece EM, and they can be competitive options. You can also choose to run 4-piece Viridescent Venerer, which is getting buffed to include Stellar Swirl, and this allows you to run 4-piece Instructors on an Anima support, which can be optimal for team DPS. 4-piece Viridescent Venerer Mizuki plus Instructor's Anima support is a common setup in Calcs, but the best set really depends on how good your artifacts are, the team you're playing, and your investment level. For instance, C6 Mizuki would prefer EM sets like Gilded Dreams, so generally, you should just pick the set you have the best stats for. For main stats, Mizuki wants EM Hourglass, EM Goblet, and Crit Circlet. If your Mizuki is C6, use an EM Circlet. For substats, she just wants Crit and EM, with EM substats being slightly better at C6. Don't need to worry about energy recharge, Mizuki just bursts whenever available if you need the healing, and if you have your C4, she can burst more consistently. Lastly, let's go over Mizuki's new best Stellar Swirl teams. In version 7.0, there aren't that many available Stellar Swirl supports to choose from, so more options are likely to come in the future. For cryo supports, you ideally want to run both Odette and Cryo Traveler since they both have off-field cryo application, team buffs, and good personal damage. Then you also want an Anima support. The most common and accessible option is Sucrose, very strong character that has a little bit of grouping and buffs the team's EM, which increases Stellar Swirl damage. Now if you happen to have C6 Farazon, who increases Anima Animo crit damage, which includes Animo Stellar Swirl damage, on paper, C6 Farazan is better than Sucrose for damage. However, Farazan has high energy requirements and is burst reliant, so in content like Stygian Onslaught, Sucrose may be better in practice. Now, if your Cryo Traveler isn't available, such as if you want to play them in Stellar Conduct instead, you can use another cryo support like Chi-Chi or C6 Diona, along with Odette and Sucrose. You can also do the same thing while using Farazan instead of Sucrose. But another potential option is to use both C6 Farazan and Sucrose in a triple Animo team, allowing for a DPS set on Mizuki while still having both 4-piece Viridescent Venerer and 4-piece Instructors on the team. Now, if you don't have Odette, you can use Chi-Chi or C6 Diona as an off-field cryo support, along with Cryo Traveler and Sucrose of Farazan as the Animo support. Lastly, you can potentially run Yai in the team instead of one of the cryo supports, generally Cryo Traveler, to play a team with both Stellar Swirl and Stellar Conduct. But how effective mixing the stellar reactions actually will be, instead of just focusing on one, depends on how the team plays out in-game on release. Overall, Mizuki's new Stellar Swirl oriented buffs make her a significantly stronger character and much more meta relevant. Her previous role as a generic Animo on-fielder wasn't very unique, so she didn't really stand out. But with her new role as an Animo Stellar Swirl DPS, she fulfills a very special niche in the game, being the only Animo Stellar Swirl DPS in 7.0. And these new Mizuki teams deal good damage while also being easy to play, making her one of the best DPSs in the game. Her best teams do ideally want Odette and Cryo Traveler, and Mizuki's early constellations like C1 and C2 do make a significant difference, and if you have her C6, even better. But if you have these pieces, Mizuki looks very strong and will get stronger in the future if new Stellar supports release, which is likely. Now, as a standard banner character, Mizuki won't remain as the best Animo Stellar Swirl DPS. For instance, Vesna is slotted to release in version 7.1, and she is expected to be a new Animo Stellar Swirl DPS, and I fully expect her to be a better DPS than Mizuki. But this doesn't make Mizuki completely irrelevant. She's a standard banner character that you can pick for free from selectors, and you can lose your 50-50 to her at any time, making her much more accessible. So as a standard banner character, Mizuki looks amazing with her new buffs. That's everything I wanted to cover about the newly buffed Mizuki. Big thanks to theorycrafters Frost, raulfigas, Jackson, and Sleepy for all the cited calcs and their help with the creation of this guide. If you found this video helpful, consider liking the video or sub to the channel so you don't miss out on similar guide videos in the future. Feel free to leave any questions you have in the comments, and with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.